Tonight, we're not here to fix anything, not to understand everything, not to become someone better before you're allowed to rest. This is a quiet space where we gently let go and return to inner peace through soft Zen stories inspired by the Buddha, shared slowly so your mind can soften and your body can rest. Maybe today asked a little too much from you. Too many thoughts, too many worries, too many small things you tried to hold together. And maybe, just for this moment, you're ready to set them down. Here, you don't need to improve yourself. You don't need to solve tomorrow. You are already enough simply by being here, breathing quietly. Just for a moment. Where are you listening from tonight? Wherever you are, I'm grateful you're here, sharing this quiet space. Let your breath slow as if it remembers the way home. Let your shoulders soften like they no longer need to carry the world. Tonight, we'll listen to a simple story. A story from ordinary life, carrying a small thread of Zen and Buddhist wisdom. Not to give you more to think about, but to help you loosen your grip. Because suffering rarely ends by force. It softens when we stop holding it so tightly. There's nothing to rush, nothing to achieve, only a gentle drifting into rest, into stillness. Whether you stay awake or slowly fall asleep, this moment is already enough. And now, we begin tonight's journey with these Zen stories. Some anger doesn't feel like heat. It feels like distance. It shows up as a short reply, a delayed call back, a quick change of subject. It doesn't slam doors, it just quietly keeps them half closed. That kind of anger had been around for a long time, long enough that it stopped feeling like anger and started feeling like a personality trait. This is just how we are. This is just how it went. We don't talk about that. The kitchen was quiet that night. A single light above the island was on, warm but not bright. A cup of tea sat cooling on the counter. The house made soft noises, pipes settling the refrigerator, humming the faint click of a ceiling fan switching speeds in another room. A hand rested on the edge of the counter. The skin there had a scar, not a dramatic one, not something strangers asked about, just a pale line that caught the light when the wrist turned. The scar came from years ago, a simple accident, a broken glass in the sink, a fast reach without thinking, a sharp sting, then blood, then stitches, then time. Now, it was mostly forgotten. Until moments like this, when the body was still and the mind wandered to places it usually avoided. The anger wasn't about the scar, but the scar reminded the mind of something else, another old wound. One that didn't show on the skin. A family argument from years ago. Not even a single argument, really. More like a long series of little misunderstandings collected and stacked until one day, something heavy fell. There had been harsh words, a story told wrong, a phone call that ended too fast, a holiday that felt awkward, and then slowly, the silence became normal. No one declared a cutoff. No one officially ended things. It just became easier not to try, easier not to risk more disappointment. That night, the tea had gone lukewarm. It was lifted anyway. A small sip. The taste was flat. The cup was set back down with a soft clink. The scar caught the light again. There was a strange thing about scars. They're proof that something happened, but they're also proof that something ended. The wound closed. The skin decided it would keep going. The mind returned to the old family moment and immediately tried to make it simple. They were wrong. I was right. They never apologized. I didn't deserve that. It's comforting to keep the story clean. Clean stories are easy to hold, but real life is rarely that neat. A thumb traced the scar without thinking. The skin there was smooth, but different. Not painful, just changed. The thought came softly, if this scar could heal without becoming the whole hand, maybe the old hurt didn't have to become the whole relationship. Not a command, not a lesson, just a possibility. Forgiveness is often imagined as a big moment. A phone call, a speech, a tearful reunion. But most of the time it starts much smaller. It starts as a shift inside the person carrying the weight, a willingness to loosen the grip, not because the other person earned it, but because holding it has started to cost too much. The kitchen light stayed steady. The house stayed quiet. Outside, a car passed, and the headlights slid across the wall for a second, then disappeared. The mind tried to argue with the softness. If I let this go, they win. If I forgive, it means it wasn't a big deal. If I soften, I'm saying it was okay. But forgiveness doesn't mean the wound didn't happen. It means the wound doesn't get to keep bleeding every time you touch it. The scar on the wrist wasn't an apology from the glass. It wasn't justice. It was just the body moving on. The mind didn't like that comparison. The mind wanted something cleaner. A clear apology, a clear admission, a clear ending. But life doesn't always give that. Sometimes the only clarity available is the choice to stop reopening the wound. Another sip of tea, still lukewarm, still not great, and yet drinkable. That was how the relationship felt in the mind sometimes. Not perfect, not warm, but still there, still possible. The question wasn't, should I go back to how it was? That was impossible. The question was something quieter. Can I let it be changed without letting it be dead? The scar didn't answer. It just existed. Calm, neutral, honest. A text message sat unsent in the phone's draft folder. Not a full conversation, just a line that had been typed and deleted a few times over the last month. Something simple like, "Hey, I was thinking about you." It wasn't sent that night. But the idea of sending it stopped feeling like weakness. It started to feel like strength, the same kind of strength that heals. Not loud strength, not proud strength, just steady strength. The light above the island hummed softly. The tea cooled further. The hand rested again on the counter scar, visible not as a flaw, but as evidence. Evidence that something can hurt and still become something you live with. The next morning arrived quietly. No dramatic shift in feeling, Just a slightly different weight in the chest, the kind you only notice because it's lighter than before. Sunlight slipped into the kitchen in thin lines. Dust moved slowly through it. The scar on the wrist looked different in daylight, less noticeable, almost ordinary. A phone buzzed once on the counter, a notification from a news app. Nothing important. Still, the screen lit up and the draft message appeared again when the phone was unlocked. The words were still there, simple, unfinished. The mind hesitated. It always did at this point. It brought up the old list, what was said, what wasn't said, who should have reached out first, how long it had been. Forgiveness doesn't erase memory. It changes how memory sits in the body. The scar didn't hurt when the wrist moved. It didn't reopen just because it was seen. It stayed closed, doing its quiet work. That didn't mean the past was harmless. It meant the past no longer had sharp edges. A photo frame was picked up from the shelf, not a carefully chosen one. Just something that had ended up there over the years. A family picture from long ago. Everyone younger. Everyone trying in their own way. It was easier now to see how many versions of the story had existed at once. Everyone holding their own piece. Everyone convinced theirs was the full picture. Anger had once helped create distance. Distance had helped reduce pain. But over time, distance had started to feel like something else, like numbness. And numbness isn't the same as peace. The phone was set back down, not to avoid the message, but to give the moment more space. This didn't need to be rushed. Healing rarely does. The idea of forgiveness still felt misunderstood. It wasn't about pretending things were fine. It wasn't about reopening old patterns. It wasn't about going back. It was about letting the scar be a scar. Not a wound, not an identity. Later, while rinsing a mug in the sink, the water ran over the wrist again. The skin there was warm, alive, responsive. The mind noticed something else then. The anger that had once flared around the memory didn't show up the same way anymore. It didn't leap forward. It didn't demand attention. It felt tired. Like it had done its job and didn't need to keep working. There was a relief in that. A quiet one. Forgiveness doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with certainty. Sometimes it shows up as the absence of the old reaction. A holiday card arrived in the mail later that week. The handwriting on the envelope was familiar. The sight of it used to cause an immediate tightening. This time the reaction came, and then passed. The card was opened, read once, then set down. No response was sent that day, and that was okay. Forgiveness doesn't require immediate action. It doesn't force connection before the system is ready. The scar remained, visible in some light, invisible in others. It no longer felt like proof of damage. It felt like proof of endurance. The past couldn't be undone. The relationship couldn't return to its old shape. But neither needed to be erased. The idea of reaching out shifted again, from I should to I might, from obligation to choice. That difference mattered. The phone stayed nearby. The message draft stayed simple. No explanations, no apologies demanded. Just an opening, a small one. Whether it would be sent tomorrow or next month didn't feel urgent anymore. Healing doesn't mean everything is fixed. It means the pain has stopped asking for your full attention. The scar had stopped asking for it long ago. Standing there, the wrist turned slightly. The light caught the pale line once more, not as a reminder of what was lost, but of what had already survived. And for now, that was enough. The parking lot was almost empty. Just a few cars scattered across the far rows, their windshields catching the last light of the day. The grocery store sign hummed faintly behind them, steady and indifferent. Somewhere near the entrance, a cart rattled as someone pushed it back into place, the sound echoing longer than it should have. They sat in their car with the engine off, hands resting on the steering wheel, not quite ready to go anywhere. Earlier, the day had fallen apart in a quiet way. No shouting, no dramatic ending. Just a short conversation that didn't go the way they'd hoped. A polite tone, a careful explanation. Words like, unfortunately and at this time. The kind of ending that leaves no clear edge to push against, no one to blame. Not even yourself yet, somehow still leaves a heaviness behind. Failure doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it slips in gently dressed as a reasonable outcome. They'd nodded, thanked the person on the other end, closed the laptop, done all the right things. And still the feeling followed them out the door, into the car, into the long pause before turning the key. Now the sky was changing. A thick layer of clouds hung low, dull and gray, like they'd been there all day. But near the horizon, something else was happening. A thin band of light pushed through soft and warm, coloring the edges of the clouds in pale gold. The sun hadn't disappeared. It had just been hidden. They noticed how quickly their mind had jumped to conclusions earlier. This means I'm not good enough. This proves I waited too long. This sets me back more than I can afford. The thoughts came fast, stacking on top of one another, each one sounding certain, final. As if one moment could define the shape of an entire life. They leaned forward and wiped a small smudge from the inside of the windshield with their sleeve. The glass cleared just enough to sharpen the view. The light grew brighter for a second, then shifted again as the clouds moved. It occurred to them that the sun didn't argue with the clouds. It didn't rush them, didn't burn through them, didn't take their presence personally. It simply stayed where it was doing what it always did. There had been other days like this before. Other moments that felt like proof of something going wrong. And yet looking back, those moments hadn't erased who they were. They hadn't taken away their ability to learn to try again, to show up differently next time. But in the middle of it, it never felt that way. In the middle of it, the clouds felt permanent. They remembered being younger, equating success with visibility. If something was seen, it mattered. If it wasn't acknowledged, it didn't count. Praise felt like sunlight. Silence felt like disappearance. Over time, that belief hardened. They learned to track their worth through outcomes, through approvals, through signs that others could see and name. So when something didn't work out, it didn't just feel disappointing. it felt like dimming. They sat back in the seat, feeling the cool fabric against their shoulders. The car next to them pulled out slowly, tires crunching against loose gravel. For a moment, the lot was quiet again. The sky kept changing. The clouds drifted, reshaping themselves without effort. Lights slid along their edges, sometimes bright, sometimes barely there. The scene refused to settle into a single interpretation. They took a breath, not deep, not intentional. Just the kind that happens when the body realizes it's safe to pause. What if this moment isn't saying anything about my value? The thought surprised them. Not because it felt obviously true, but because it felt possible. They had been treating the outcome like a verdict, a final word. But maybe it was closer to weather. Something that passed through, something that changed conditions without changing the sky itself. They thought about how often they'd admired resilience in others, how they'd watched people move through setbacks and still remain themselves. Still kind, still capable, still worthy of respect even when things didn't go their way. Somehow, it had never occurred to them that the same might apply inward. The light near the horizon deepened, turning amber, then soft orange. For a brief moment, the clouds looked almost translucent, like thin fabric held up to a lamp. They felt a familiar ache in their chest, not sharp, just heavy. A mix of disappointment and tiredness. They didn't push it away, didn't label it as weakness. They let it sit there like the clouds sat in the sky. Failure, they were realizing, doesn't erase what came before it. It doesn't cancel effort. It doesn't rewrite your entire story unless you let it. It only blocks the view for a while. They stayed in the car longer than they needed to, watching the sky dim slowly, the colors fading into blue-gray. The sun slipped fully behind the clouds, now no longer visible at all. And still, they knew it was there. They turned the key but didn't drive off right away. The dashboard lights came on softly, casting a pale glow across the inside of the car. The radio stayed off. The world outside felt quiet enough on its own. The sky had lost most of its color, now settling into a calm, even gray. The disappointment was still there. It hadn't gone anywhere, but it no longer felt like an emergency. There's a difference between pain that needs fixing and pain that just needs space. For a long time, they had treated every uncomfortable feeling like a problem to solve. If something hurt, it must mean something was wrong with them. If they felt stuck, it must mean they had failed in some essential way. Sitting there, watching the clouds thicken, they began to sense another option. Maybe this feeling didn't need a solution. Maybe it just needed permission to pass through. They thought about how often they had confused visibility with value. How praise felt like sunlight and silence felt like being erased. How easily one unanswered email could undo weeks of steady work in their mind. It wasn't that they believed others were shallow. It was that they had learned to see themselves through the same narrow lens. Outcome equals worth. Progress equals proof. Setback equals something missing. Those rules had never been spoken out loud, but they had shaped the way they moved through the world all the same. The clouds above continued their slow drift. Some thickened, some thinned. None of them stayed exactly as they were. The sun didn't fight them. It didn't try to shine harder to compensate. It didn't dim itself in response. It simply remained. The thought landed gently. What if my value is like that? Not something that appears only when conditions are perfect. Not something that has to be proven each time it's questioned. Just something that exists steady and unchanged, whether or not it's being seen. They felt a subtle shift in their chest. Not relief exactly, more like steadiness. The kind that comes when you stop arguing with what is. They had done their part. They had shown up. They had tried. The outcome was only one small piece of a much larger movement, one moment in a longer cycle. They started the car fully this time and eased out of the parking space. As they drove, the headlights cut through the dim evening, illuminating patches of road, one at a time. They didn't need to see the whole way, just the next few feet. That felt familiar. So much of their life had unfolded like this already, step by step. Light reaching only so far ahead. Trust built not from certainty, but from motion. A red light caught them at the edge of the lot. They stopped and waited. The clouds above were darker now, but the air felt cooler, calmer. They noticed how their breath matched the rhythm of the drive. Inhale at the stop. Exhale as the car rolled forward again. The body knew how to move through this, even if the mind still had questions. There would be other attempts, other conversations, other moments where things didn't go as planned. That wasn't a sign of deficiency. It was a sign of being in motion. Failure, when seen clearly, wasn't the opposite of worth. It was simply part of the weather. And weather changes. They merged onto the road streetlights passing overhead in a steady pattern. Each one lit up the windshield briefly, then disappeared behind them. The repetition was comforting, predictable in a way that didn't demand attention. They didn't feel triumphant. They didn't suddenly feel confident or resolved. They just felt intact, still themselves, still capable, still worthy of being here exactly as they were. The clouds could stay as long as they needed to. The sun wasn't going anywhere. There's a particular kind of fear that doesn't feel dramatic at all. It doesn't rush in. It doesn't shout. It just sits quietly right at the edge of the next step. That was the feeling that evening. The room was dim lit by a single desk lamp that made a small circle of light and left the rest untouched. Outside, the city had already slowed down. Inside, time felt stretched, like it was waiting for something to happen. The screen was open. The inbox was open too. Nothing new had arrived. No message, no update. Just the same subject lines, the same silence that had been there all day. The kind of silence that invites imagination to fill the space. Hands rested on the desk, fingers still. The body leaned forward slightly as if that might help something appear. The mind kept stepping ahead, rehearsing outcomes that hadn't happened yet. Good ones, bad ones. Mostly bad ones because fear is efficient that way. It felt like standing at the edge of something unseen, not a visible cliff, more like an absence. The future didn't look dangerous. It just didn't look like anything at all. And that somehow was worse. The urge was to wait, to stay exactly where things were known, even if they weren't comfortable. Waiting felt safer than stepping into uncertainty without proof that something solid would meet the foot on the other side. The chair creaked softly as weight shifted. The lamp hummed faintly. The room offered small, ordinary sounds that suggested stability, but the mind wasn't interested in those. It was focused on the gap. What if there was nothing there? What if this step was a mistake? What if moving forward made things worse? These questions didn't ask to be answered. They asked to be obeyed. After a while, the body noticed something else. The shoulders had crept upward. The jaw was tight. The breath was shallow, hovering near the top of the chest, like it didn't want to commit to being fully taken. There was a pause, not a decision. Just a pause long enough to feel how uncomfortable standing still had become. The idea appeared quietly. Just one small step. Not a leap, not a commitment, not a final choice. Just a step small enough that it couldn't ruin anything. The hand moved to the mouse. The cursor hovered. Then instead of refreshing the inbox again, the screen was minimized. The room felt different immediately. Not better, just different. The light from the lamp fell onto the desk instead of the screen. The edges of the room came back into awareness. The body leaned back in the chair. It was strange how small that action was and how much resistance it had carried. Fear hadn't been about the email. It had been about the idea that movement required certainty. Standing up from the chair, the floor met the feet without ceremony. The body stood there for a moment, unsure what came next. The gap hadn't disappeared. It was still there, invisible and wide, but now something else was present too. Momentum. The step hadn't revealed a bridge. It hadn't solved the future. It had only shown that the ground under the feet was still reliable. Walking to the window, the glass reflected a faint outline of the room. Lights from other apartments dotted the darkness. Other lives were unfolding, each with their own gaps, their own unanswered questions. No one else seemed to have it figured out either. The thought didn't bring comfort, but it brought honesty. The fear softened slightly, not because it had been argued with, but because it was no longer in charge. The body had moved anyway. Returning to the desk, the chair welcomed weight again. The screen stayed minimized. For the first time all evening, there was no urge to check. The step had already been taken. The gap was still invisible, but it felt less threatening now. Maybe bridges don't appear in advance. Maybe they form underfoot, one small decision at a time, not as a structure you can see from afar, but as something you discover only after you've already moved. The body settled into the chair. The breath deepened slightly. The night continued. Nothing had been resolved, but something had begun. And for now, that was enough. Later that night, the gap showed up again. Not at the desk this time, but in quieter places. in the pause before turning off the light, in the moment between setting the phone down and actually letting the hand relax. It wasn't loud. It didn't demand attention. It just lingered like a question left open on purpose. The body noticed it before the mind did. A slight tightness in the stomach. A familiar pull forward toward tomorrow. Toward outcomes that hadn't arrived yet and didn't know their own shape. Fear has a strange way of pretending to be practical. It says it's just being careful, just planning ahead, just trying to prevent regret. But standing there in the dim room, it was easier to see what fear was really asking for. It wasn't asking for safety. It was asking for certainty. And certainty wasn't available. The floor lamp cast a soft glow across the wall. Shadows shifted slightly as the air moved. Everything in the room existed without needing to know what came next. The body lowered onto the couch. The cushion adjusted. Support appeared without negotiation. That felt important. The gap in the mind was loudest when attention stayed in the future. When it imagined the step after the next step, and then the one after that. When it tried to see the whole bridge before even leaving the edge. But when attention returned to what was here, the weight of the body, the texture of the fabrics, quiet hum of the building, the gap lost some of its power. It was still there, but it wasn't in control. It became clear that fear didn't actually mind small steps. It panicked at the idea of irreversible ones. It feared commitment more than movement. So movement stayed small. The phone was placed face down on the table. Not hidden, not turned off, just not centered. The room seemed to exhale at the same time the body did. Another step. The breath deepened, not intentionally, but because it finally had room to. The shoulders softened, the jaw unclenched. Nothing dramatic happened, and that too felt important. Fear often expects catastrophe or relief, something big enough to justify its presence. But here, there was neither, just continuation. The mind tried again later while lying in bed. It brought up alternate futures. It tested scenarios. It asked the same question in different forms. Is this the right path? The question didn't need an answer tonight. There was a realization, quiet and almost easy to miss. The gap didn't exist because something was missing. It existed because something hadn't been defined yet, and not everything needed to be. Uncertainty wasn't a flaw in the process. It was part of it. Bridges, it turned out, weren't always structures you could see. Sometimes they were patterns of response, a willingness to adjust, a trust that the next support would appear only when it was needed. The body rolled onto its side. The mattress shifted. The room stayed still. Fear softened again, not because it had been convinced, but because it had been outpaced. Action, even gentle action, had moved faster than imagination. There was no guarantee that the next step would be easy, no promise that it wouldn't require effort or courage. But there was a growing sense that standing frozen at the edge was no longer the safest option. The body had already learned something essential, that it could move without knowing, that it could step without seeing. That support often revealed itself only after weight had been placed on it. Sleep arrived gradually without announcement. The gap didn't close. It simply stopped demanding attention. And in that quiet, it felt possible to trust that when morning came, the next step would be there to take. Not because the future had been solved, but because the present had proven itself steady enough to stand on. For now, that was all that was needed. It started as something small. Not a crisis, not a big feeling. Just an itch, one of those irritating little sensations that shows up for no clear reason. A spot on the arm that suddenly demanded attention. The kind of thing you can ignore for a few seconds until you notice you're thinking about it. And then almost without meaning to, you scratch. At first it feels helpful, like relief, like you fixed it. But then it comes back. Stronger this time, sharper. Like the skin learned a new way to complain. So you scratch again, a little harder, a little longer, chasing that clean moment when it stops. Except it doesn't stop. It spreads. That night the apartment was quiet, in the way it usually is when the day finally lets go. The overhead lights were off. A single lamp made the walls look softer, like they had less to say. The TV wasn't on. The phone was charging face down. In the kitchen, the dishwasher ran with a low, steady swish, like waves in a small indoor ocean. The person had been trying to relax. That was the plan anyway. A shower, comfortable clothes, something warm to drink, a normal wind down. Nothing special. But the mind had an itch too. It had latched onto a moment from earlier in the day, one sentence spoken in a meeting. Not even a terrible sentence. Not an obvious mistake. Just a comment that landed oddly, followed by a half-second pause from someone else. A half-second pause. That was all it took. Now, hours later, that pause had become a whole movie in the mind. The mind replayed it with different camera angles. It zoomed in. It added meaning. It wrote subtitles. It asked, "Why did you say that?" Then it asked, "What did they think?" Then it asked, "What does this mean about you?" The body sat on the couch, one leg tucked under the other. Fingers tapping lightly against the fabric, as if the hands needed something to do with all this energy. The dishwasher sound kept going steady and calm, like the world didn't care about a half-second pause in a meeting. But the mind cared. The mind cared a lot. It scratched at the memory the way a hand scratches at skin. Maybe you should have phrased it differently. Maybe you look stupid. Maybe they're talking about it. Maybe you always do this. Maybe this is why you can't get ahead. The thoughts felt urgent, like they were trying to protect something. Like they were warning you so you wouldn't be hurt again. And in a strange way, that's what they were doing. Overthinking isn't always vanity. Sometimes it's a nervous system trying to stay safe. Sometimes it's the brain believing that if it analyzes pain in advance, it can prevent pain later. It's not logical, but it is familiar. It's like scratching. It comes from the honest desire for relief. But it doesn't deliver relief. Not for long. The person reached up and rubbed the inside of the wrist, an absent gesture like the body was acting out the metaphor without knowing it. There was a real itch there too, probably from dry skin, maybe from a new detergent. The rubbing turned into scratching, and for a second it felt better. Then it got worse. The skin warmed under the fingernails. The itch spread outward like little sparks. The person stopped surprised and stared at the spot as if it had betrayed them. And that's when something clicked. This is exactly what happens in the mind. You poke at a worry. You pick at a thought. You scratch at a memory. And instead of healing it, you inflame it. Not because you're doing it wrong, not because you're weak, but because some things don't settle through force. Some things settle through non-reaction, through leaving them alone long enough for the body to realize it's safe. The person leaned back against the couch cushion, the fabric cool against the shoulders. The dishwasher swished. The lamp hummed faintly. The room held steady. The mind, though, wanted to keep going. It wanted to keep scratching at the meeting moment. It wanted to squeeze meaning out of it until something finally felt certain. Certainty, the mind promised, would feel like relief. But certainty wasn't available. Not tonight. Not with that old moment. So the next best thing was something simpler, noticing the urge to scratch. The person didn't try to stop thinking altogether. That would have felt like trying not to itch. Impossible. And weirdly stressful. Instead, the person just noticed the motion inside the reach, the grab the pick. There it is again. The mind going back. The mind touching the sore spot. The person took a slow breath, not as a technique, not as a performance. Just a breath that happened when the shoulders finally dropped. And then something even stranger happened. The thought came back, but it landed softer. It still said, "That was awkward," but it didn't immediately become, "You are awkward." That small difference mattered. The itch in the wrist was still there too faintly. The skin still wanted attention, but the person kept the hand still resting it on the thigh. Not with rigid discipline, just with curiosity. What happens if I don't scratch? At first, nothing. The itch pulsed once like a protest. Then it pulsed again, less convincing. The mind did the same. It offered another replay, another angle, another story. But the person stayed. Not fighting, not obeying, just staying. The dishwasher kept going. The swish-swish sound didn't speed up when the mind got loud. It didn't slow down when the body relaxed. It just continued, patient and indifferent. And in that steady sound, the person felt something like permission. Maybe the goal wasn't to control the itch. Maybe the goal was to stop reacting to it like it was an emergency. The body softened another notch. The hand remained still. The mind replayed the meeting moment once more. And then for a brief second it didn't. In that brief second, the room felt bigger. Not because anything changed, but because the mind stopped tightening around one tiny point. And the person realized the itch doesn't last forever if you stop feeding it. The pause didn't last long. The thought returned, of course. It always does. Another angle, another imagined reaction from someone else, another quiet question, about what it all meant. The mind was persistent, like a hand hovering just above the skin, waiting for permission to scratch again. But something had changed. The person noticed the return without the usual rush to fix it. There was a small gap now, thin but real, between the itch and the reaction, between the thought and the belief that it had to be handled immediately. The body stayed where it was, back against the couch, feet on the floor, hands resting open. The lamp cast the same warm circle of light. The dishwasher finished its cycle with a soft click and then went silent, leaving a deeper quiet behind. In that quiet, the itch became clearer, not louder, clearer. It wasn't shouting, it was asking. The mind's itch wasn't actually about the meeting, or the sentence, or the pause. Those were just the places it landed. What it really wanted was reassurance, safety, proof that nothing bad was about to happen. Scratching had always felt like the fastest way to get that proof. Think it through, analyze it, prepare for every possible outcome. That way nothing could surprise you, except surprise was still part of life. No amount of scratching had ever removed that. The person shifted slightly, feeling the fabric of the couch under their fingers. The texture was rougher than expected. A small detail, but grounding, real, present. The kind of sensation that didn't need interpretation. The itch on the wrist came back faintly, like a reminder. Not strong enough to demand attention, just strong enough to be noticed. The mind mirrored it, offering another replay of the moment from earlier. This time, instead of following it, the person stayed with the feeling of wanting to follow it. There was an urge there, a pull, a tightness in the chest that said, do something. And underneath that urge was something even simpler: discomfort. Not danger, not failure, just discomfort. The body had learned over time to treat discomfort like a threat, to respond fast, to scratch first and ask questions later. That habit had been built carefully, layer by layer, through years of trying to cope, to be competent, to stay ahead of pain. There was no need to tear that habit down tonight. No need to fix it or replace it with something better. All that was happening was a brief experiment. What if discomfort could be felt without being corrected? The person stayed still, not frozen, just not reacting. The itch pulsed again, weaker this time. The mind replayed the thought, but the replay lacked energy. It felt thinner, like a copy of a copy. A few seconds passed. Then something subtle happened. The itch shifted. It didn't vanish all at once. It faded the way sound fades when a door closes down the hall. Gradual, almost unnoticeable unless you were paying attention. The skin still tingled, but the urgency was gone. The thought did the same. It drifted, lost its sharp edge, and loosened its grip. It didn't resolve into a lesson or a conclusion. It simply moved on. The person exhaled, surprised to realize they'd been holding their breath again. The release wasn't dramatic, just a longer breath out, like air leaving a balloon slowly instead of all at once. There was a quiet relief in that. Not the relief of certainty, but the relief of not having to do anything right now. This was the part that often got missed. Letting go wasn't about suppressing thoughts. It wasn't about forcing calm or repeating the right phrases or achieving some perfect mental state. It was about seeing the pattern clearly enough to stop feeding it. An itch doesn't heal because you explain it. It heals because you stop touching it. The same was true here. The room felt softer again. Not because it had changed, but because the mind wasn't pressing so hard against one small point. The space of attention widened. Sounds returned, the faint hum of electricity in the walls. A distant car passing, the quiet presence of the night. There would be more itches. More thoughts that demanded attention, more moments when the urge to scratch felt irresistible. This wasn't the end of overthinking, it wasn't a cure. But it was a different relationship. Instead of believing every itch needed action, the person had seen something for themselves. Some sensations settle faster when they're left alone. Some thoughts lose power when they aren't answered. The body adjusted on the couch, finding a position that felt natural. Eyelids grew heavier, not from exhaustion, but from a lack of resistance. The nervous system, no longer on high alert, began to downshift on its own. The itch was gone now. Not conquered, not defeated. Just finished. And in its absence, there was nothing special. No insight, no reward. Just a quiet, ordinary moment that didn't ask to be improved. That it turned out was enough. Anger doesn't always arrive as fire. Sometimes it comes as a slow burn. Quiet, persistent, the kind that sits in the background and colors everything else. That night, it showed up in the shower. The bathroom was small, steam already beginning to cloud the mirror. The water came on warm, then hotter. The sound filled the space, steady and enclosing, like the world had narrowed down to this one narrow channel. The day had been long, not disastrous, just layered. One small frustration stacked on top of another. A tone that felt dismissive. A look that lingered a second too long. A rule applied unfairly. Nothing that would make a good story later. Just enough to accumulate. Anger thrives on accumulation. The water hit the shoulders, muscles loosened slightly. And that's when the replay began. It wasn't one moment. It was several. Edited together, tightened, sharpened. The mind spoke quickly now, listing injustices, rehearsing arguments that would never be said out loud. They don't care. They always get away with it. Why does this keep happening? The body reacted before any thought finished. Jaw tight, breath shallow. Hands clenched, then unclenched, then clenched again. Hot water is supposed to relax things. But anger can turn even comfort into fuel. There was a faint sting on the skin. At first it was easy to ignore. Just heat, just sensitivity. But it lingered. The shoulders began to feel raw, irritated, like the water was doing more harm than good. The temperature was adjusted down slightly. The sting eased, but didn't disappear right away. That was when the thought surfaced, uninvited, but accurate. This is what it's like. Anger feels like something you pour outward, toward a person, a system, a situation. It feels directed, purposeful, but it doesn't land where you think. Like acid rain, it eats away at the container long before it touches whatever you're aiming at. The anger that had been carried all day hadn't changed anything outside. The people involved were probably already home, already distracted by their own evenings. But inside this small bathroom, the effects were obvious. Tight muscles, shallow breathing, skin irritated by heat that should have felt soothing. The mind resisted the comparison at first. It wanted the anger to be useful, righteous, deserved. If I let this go, nothing will change, it argued. But holding it hadn't changed anything either. The water ran over the back, down the arms, pooling briefly at the elbows before disappearing down the drain. No matter how long it poured, it didn't fill anything. It didn't accumulate. It just passed through. Anger, on the other hand, stayed. There was a memory of a time when anger had been expressed openly. Years ago. A sharp confrontation. Words spoken with clarity and volume. It had felt powerful in the moment. Later, there had been a hollow feeling. The relationship hadn't improved. The situation hadn't resolved. The anger had simply found a new place to sit. The water temperature was turned down again, cooler now. The skin began to calm, the sting faded. The mind slowed just enough to notice something underneath the anger. Fatigue, disappointment, the quiet sadness of feeling unseen. Anger often steps in front of those feelings. It speaks louder, so they don't have to. The shower filled with steam again. The mirror disappeared completely this time. No reflection, no face, just heat and sound. It became clear that the anger wasn't protecting anything anymore. It was corroding. The body leaned slightly into the tile, forehead cool against the wall. A long breath went out heavier than expected. There was no decision to forgive, no vow to be calm. Just the recognition that continuing like this would keep burning the same place over and over. The anger was still there, but it had lost some of its urgency, some of its authority. The water continued to fall, indifferent, neutral. It didn't care about blame or fairness. It just moved where gravity took it. And standing there, it was possible to see that anger, too, could be allowed to move, to pass, not to be poured endlessly into the same container. The sting was gone now. The skin felt normal again. The shower kept running. The shower was turned off, but the heat lingered. Steam hung in the air, slow to leave. Drops of water slid down the tile-thin lines, tracing paths that didn't last very long. A towel was reached for. The fabric felt rough at first, then comforting. The skin underneath was warm, slightly pink, but no longer irritated. It had already begun to settle. That felt important. Anger rarely ends when the moment ends. It looks for somewhere else to go. A new target. A memory. A person who isn't even in the room. Standing there wrapped in a towel, the mind tried again. It brought up the same faces, the same conversations. This time with sharper edges. It wanted direction. It wanted an outlet. The urge was familiar. To send a message, to complain to someone else, to replay the story with better wording, clearer, blame, stronger justification. But something had shifted. The body felt calmer than the thoughts. That mismatch was noticeable. The chest wasn't tight anymore. The shoulders weren't raised. The anger no longer had full access to the nervous system. It was still loud, but it wasn't driving. That's when the metaphor returned clearer now. Acid rain doesn't destroy in one pour. It works slowly, quietly, over time. It weakens structures from the inside long before anything collapses. The anger that had been carried all day hadn't ruined anyone else's evening. It hadn't corrected behavior. It hadn't brought fairness. It had just kept the body tense, the mind restless, the skin raw. A mirror cleared enough to show a blurred reflection. Not sharp, not detailed, just a shape. A person standing there tired. The towel was adjusted, hair was pushed back. A breath came in, then out. Normal, unforced. There was a memory of someone once saying, "If you don't let it out, it'll eat you alive." At the time, that had sounded true, responsible even. But maybe letting it out didn't always mean throwing it at someone else. Maybe it meant letting it move through without giving it a permanent home. The anger didn't need to be suppressed. It didn't need to be justified. It just didn't need to be stored. Getting dressed felt slower than usual. Intentional without trying to be. The simple actions, pulling on a shirt, tying the drawstring, brought attention back to the present moment. In the other room, the house was quiet. No notifications, no voices. Just the low hum of the heater clicking on and off. The mind tried once more to revive the anger, but it came back thinner this time, less convincing. Like a story that had already been told too many times. It was easier now to see what had been happening. The anger had felt like armor, like proof of self-respect, like energy. But armor gets heavy when worn too long. Forgiveness didn't arrive as a feeling. It arrived as a decision not to keep corroding from the inside. A choice not to pour more acid into a container that was already showing wear. That didn't mean trusting again. It didn't mean approving what had happened. It just meant choosing a different relationship with the anger itself. The phone stayed where it was. No messages sent, no explanations drafted. Tomorrow could handle tomorrow's responses. Tonight was about stopping the damage. The body moved toward the bedroom. Lights were turned off one by one. Each click felt like a small boundary being set, not against people but against the habit of carrying what wasn't helping. Lying down, the muscles released more fully. The mind still wandered, but without the same heat, without the same urgency. Anger hadn't disappeared. It probably wouldn't. But it no longer felt like something that needed to be poured, defended, or fed. It felt like weather. And weather passes. The room cooled slowly. The last of the steam faded from the bathroom. The skin finished calming itself, doing what it knows how to do when given the chance. Nothing had been solved, but something important had stopped, and that was enough for tonight. The laundromat was nearly empty. Two machines hummed along the back wall, their metal doors spinning slowly, rhythm steady and unhurried. A vending machine glowed in the corner, offering snacks no one seemed interested in. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, casting everything in the same pale wash. They sat on a hard plastic chair, laundry basket at their feet, phone resting loosely in their hand. It was late enough that no one expected conversation. People came here to wait to pass time, to let machines do work they didn't want to do themselves. No one asked questions. No one noticed much. They glanced at their phone again, not because there was anything new, but because habit pulled their thumb downward. Another scroll, another image, another life laid out in a clean frame. Someone announcing a promotion, someone smiling in a new city, someone else posting a caption about finally feeling like themselves. Each image landed quietly, but together they built a familiar weight. Everyone else is moving forward. The thought came without drama. It didn't shout, it didn't accuse. It just settled in heavy and convincing, like a fact that didn't need to be questioned. They locked the phone and slipped it into their pocket, feeling a brief sense of relief followed quickly by discomfort. Without the screen, there was nothing to distract from the feeling underneath. The dryers continued their slow rotation. A loose coin rattled inside one of the machines, tapping metal in a steady, uneven pattern. It sounded almost like a reminder, something small out of place, but persistent. They stood up and walked to one of the washers, pressing their face close to the glass. Clothes tumbled through cloudy watercolors, blending together for a moment before separating again. Socks, shirts, a towel. Ordinary things, indistinguishable in motion. When the cycle ended, they opened the door and reached inside. Warmth met their hands, along with the faint smell of detergent. They pulled out a shirt, then another, stacking them carefully in the basket. As they worked, they noticed their hands. One thumb had a small scar near the joint, barely visible, unless you knew to look for it. A thin white line left behind from years ago. They couldn't even remember how it happened anymore. It had become part of the landscape of their skin. They turned their hands slightly, watching the lines shift as their fingers moved. No two looked exactly the same. The ridges curved and split in patterns that felt deliberate, though they knew they weren't. Fingerprints. They had learned once in school that no two were identical, not in any meaningful way. Even among billions of people, each person carried something that had never been repeated and never would be. Standing there holding damp fabric, the thought felt strange. They had spent so much time measuring themselves against others, matching timelines, comparing achievements, wondering why their path looked slower, messier, less certain. It rarely occurred to them to question the comparison itself. You don't expect one fingerprint to match another. You don't call it a failure when it doesn't. The idea hovered, not quite landing yet. They moved to a folding table and began laying clothes flat, smoothing out wrinkles with the side of their hand. The table was cool, its surface marked with scratches and faint stains from years of use. Countless people had stood here, folding their own lives into neat stacks before carrying them back out into the world. They folded slowly, deliberately, a sleeve tucked in, a corner aligned. each movement simple, repetitive calming. Their mind drifted back to the feeling they'd had earlier, that sense of being behind. It had followed them for months now, showing up in quiet moments like this, not as panic, but as a dull, constant pressure. I should be further along. I should know what I'm doing by now. Everyone else seems to have figured it out. They paused, hands resting on a folded shirt. What if the reason it feels impossible to catch up is because there's no one to catch up to? The question didn't bring immediate comfort. It felt unfamiliar, almost unsettling. Letting go of comparison meant letting go of the map they'd been using, even if that map had never really worked for them. They picked up another piece of clothing, this time noticing the small differences. The way fabric wore thin in some places. The way seams held despite strain. Each item carried signs of its own use, its own history. No two shirts had aged the same way, even if they'd been bought together. The dryers beeped softly one by one, signaling their cycles had ended. A man in a hoodie entered the laundromat, nodded without looking up, and loaded his clothes into a machine. The space adjusted to his presence, then settled again. They stacked the last folded item and sat back down, hands resting on their knees. Their fingers left faint prints on the smooth plastic of the chair. Not visible for long. Just a slight smudge that caught the light, then disappeared. Most of the time they felt invisible, like nothing about them stood out, like they were blending into the background of their own life. But fingerprints didn't announce themselves. They were there whether anyone noticed or not. They existed without needing approval. They waited as the machines cooled the rhythm of the room, steady and predictable. The weight in their chest hadn't vanished, but it had shifted. It felt less like proof of failure and more like a habit, something learned, not something true. They reached for their phone again, then stopped. Let it stay in their pocket. They looked at their hands once more. The lines were still there, unchanged, quiet, and for the first time in a while, that felt like something solid to stand on. They finished folding and slid the last stack into the laundry basket. The basket felt heavier now, not just with clothes, but with the quiet satisfaction of something completed without rush. They carried it to the empty chair and sat down again. The plastic creaked softly under their weight. The dryers were still warm, giving off a low hum that filled the room without demanding attention. They rested their hands on the basket, fingers spread slightly, and noticed the faint impressions they left behind on the smooth lid. Not clear enough to study, not permanent. Just a brief mark of contact. It made them think about how often they'd tried to leave stronger impressions elsewhere. Trying to be louder, trying to be clearer, trying to be more impressive, more certain, more something. As if being unmistakable was the same thing as being valuable. They had spent years believing that if their life didn't look recognizable, if it didn't fit into familiar shapes and timelines, then it must be wrong. Too slow. Too late. Too different. But fingerprints were different by design. They weren't meant to line up. They weren't meant to be compared side by side and judged for consistency. Their value wasn't in how closely they matched, but in the fact that they never did. The thought settled slowly. What if my path isn't delayed, just distinct? The idea didn't come with a rush of confidence. It didn't erase doubt or suddenly make everything feel clear, but it softened something. It loosened the grip of that constant internal measuring stick. They looked around the laundromat again. Different loads, different fabrics, different people passing through at different times of night, carrying different weights. No one here was ahead or behind. They were all just here, waiting for the machines to finish, trusting the process enough to sit still. They thought about moments in their life that hadn't made sense at the time. Detours that felt unnecessary. Pauses that felt embarrassing. Choices that didn't translate well when explained to others. Those moments hadn't been wasted. They had shaped the lines, added texture, created depth in places no one else could replicate. Just like the small scar on their thumb. Just like the ridges that bent and split in patterns no one had chosen, but only they carried. They flexed their fingers slowly, feeling the joints move, the skin stretch and settle back into place. The body knew itself in ways the mind often forgot. A dryer clicked off its door, unlocking with a soft metallic sound. They stood, lifted the basket, and moved toward the exit. The door chimed gently as they pushed it open, letting in a breath of cool night air. Outside, the street was quiet. A single streetlight flickered, then steadied. The world felt open in a way it hadn't earlier. Not because anything had changed, but because they weren't trying so hard to match it. They walked to their car and set the basket in the trunk. Before closing it, they paused, hands resting on the edge, feeling the chill of the metal. They didn't need to know exactly where they were headed next. They didn't need a clean narrative or a polished explanation. They didn't need proof that their life made sense to anyone else. Their value wasn't waiting at the end of a comparison. It was already present, pressed quietly into everything they touched. Like a fingerprint, not loud, not identical, but unmistakably their own. They closed the trunk and got into the car. As they drove away, the laundromat lights faded in the rearview mirror, replaced by the steady flow of the road ahead. The lines on their hands stayed with them, unchanged, unrushed. Enough. It didn't feel like a crisis. It felt quieter than that. More like something slowly dimming without making a scene. The kind of change that doesn't announce itself, but you notice it anyway. The way you notice a room getting darker before you reach for a lamp. The evening was calm. A porch light glowed softly outside, not bright enough to light the yard, just enough to mark the edge of the house. The air was warm, but cooling, the kind that carries the smell of grass and pavement after a long day. A small candle sat on the table. It had been lit earlier, almost out of habit. Not for ritual, not for comfort, just because it felt right at the time. Now the flame was lower. It leaned to one side, flickered when the air shifted, then straightened again. Each movement felt fragile, like it might be the last. Watching it brought up an unexpected tightness in the chest. There was a familiarity to that feeling. It wasn't really about the candle. It was about the sense that something was ending. Not abruptly, not dramatically, just slowly losing strength. For a while, the flame was ignored. Attention drifted elsewhere. To the quiet street, to distant sounds of people moving inside their homes, to the feeling of having given a lot to something that no longer gave much back. Eventually, the eyes returned to the candle. The flame was smaller now, still alive, but barely. Wax pooled around the base, glossy and uneven, as if it had already accepted what was coming. The instinct was immediate. Fix it. There was a match nearby, another candle too. It would be easy to add more wax, more fuel, more light. Easy to intervene to keep it going the way it had been before. But the hand didn't move. Something hesitated. Watching the flame struggle brought up memories that weren't attached to words. A job that used to feel meaningful. A role that once made sense. A version of life that had burned brightly for a long time, until one day it didn't. Fear crept in quietly. If this goes out, what's left? What replaces it? The flame dipped again, nearly disappearing, then caught itself. That tiny recovery stirred hope. Maybe it could last a little longer. Maybe it just needed help. But hope felt tired. There was a realization forming, slow and uncomfortable. Keeping something alive past its natural rhythm doesn't always save it. Sometimes it only stretches the ending. The flame flickered sharply, reacting to a small gust of air. The body reacted too, a subtle lean forward, a readiness to protect. And then it happened. The flame thinned, wavered, and went out. No sound, no drama, just a thin thread of smoke rising into the dim air, curling slowly, as if unsure where to go next. The chest tightened, not with panic, with something closer to grief. The table looked different without the flame. The porch felt darker, emptier. The absence was immediate and undeniable. This was the part fear always focused on. The moment after something ends. The gap where light used to be. The mind rushed in quickly. You should have done something. You waited too long. Now it's gone. But beneath the noise, the body noticed something else. The warmth from the candle hadn't disappeared all at once. The wax was still warm to the touch. The air still carried a trace of smoke. The flame was gone, but its presence lingered. Sitting there, it became clear how often fear confuses ending with failure. As if something fading means it was handled wrong. As if letting something end naturally is the same as giving up. But the candle hadn't been abandoned. It had been watched, allowed to be what it was until it wasn't anymore. The darkness didn't feel dangerous. It felt unfamiliar. And unfamiliar things always look larger before the eyes adjust. The porch light hummed softly. Night sounds continued, indifferent to the small ending that had just taken place. Life hadn't paused to mourn the flame. Still, there was a weight in the chest, a sense of standing at the edge of something new, without knowing what it might become. The match stayed where it was, unlit. The decision not to relight wasn't brave, it wasn't symbolic. It was simply honest. Whatever was meant to come next hadn't shown itself yet. For now there was just the smoke thinning into nothing, the table cooling, and the quiet understanding that some things don't end, so something else can begin immediately. Sometimes they end so there can be space. And that space, though uncomfortable, was not empty in the way fear described it. Later, the absence of the flame became more noticeable than the flame ever had been. The porch felt wider. The table looked barer. Shadows settled into places they hadn't been allowed to before. At first, the darkness felt like loss, like something important had slipped away without permission. But after a while, the eyes adjusted. Details that had been washed out by the small circle of light began to appear. The grain of the wood on the table, the soft glow from the house behind the glass, the slow movement of clouds passing in front of the moon. Nothing rushed in to replace the flame, and somehow that felt right. Fear often insists that endings must be followed immediately by beginnings. That if one thing fades, another must ignite it once, or else everything falls apart. But sitting there, it became clear that transitions don't always work that way. Sometimes there is a pause. The body noticed its own state in that pause. The shoulders were lower now, the breath deeper. The constant effort to keep something alive had quietly stopped. There was relief in that, even if it came wrapped in sadness. The warmth from the candle was gone, but the body wasn't cold. The night air moved gently across skin. The chair still held weight. Support hadn't vanished just because one source of light had. This felt important. So many fears are built around the idea that if something ends, everything else collapses with it. That identity, purpose, or meaning are tied to a single flame. But life doesn't organize itself so narrowly. Light shows up in different forms. Heat travels. Energy moves. The flame hadn't been destroyed. It had completed its role. That thought didn't bring celebration. It brought steadiness. Inside the house, another room was lit. A lamp left on by habit. Through the window, its glow reached the porch, faint, but enough to soften the edges of things. Not all light announces itself. Sitting there longer, it became easier to feel how tired the effort of holding on had been. How much energy had gone into preventing an ending that was already underway. How often fear mistakes exhaustion for loyalty. Letting the flame go hadn't required courage, it had required trust. Trust that life doesn't depend on one source. Trust that what fades makes room without asking permission. Trust that renewal doesn't always look like replacement. Later, when the candle was picked up to be cleared away, the wax had hardened into uneven shapes. Small ridges, gentle curves, evidence of heat that had moved and cooled in its own time. Nothing about it looked wasted. The match was still there too, unused, available, not urgent. That too felt right. There was no promise that another flame would be lit tomorrow. No plan for what would take its place. The future stayed open, undefined, and that openness no longer felt threatening. It felt spacious. Fear had been certain that darkness meant danger, that without constant light, something bad would happen. But the darkness had turned out to be just another condition. Temporary, neutral, allowing rest. Inside, getting ready for bed, the body moved more slowly than usual. Less driven, less tense, The day didn't need to be reviewed. The ending didn't need to be justified. Some things end not because they failed, but because they finished. The night held that truth easily. And as sleep arrived, there was a quiet sense that whatever was meant to burn next would do so when the time was right. Not forced, not rushed, not rescued from ending. Until then, it was enough to sit in the dark eyes, adjusted, breathing steady, trusting that nothing essential had been lost, only transformed. The jar wouldn't open. It wasn't a dramatic problem. No urgency, no real consequence. Just a stubborn lid on a glass jar that had been tightened too far too long ago by someone who probably didn't remember doing it. The kind of small resistance that shouldn't matter and yet somehow does. The kitchen was dim lit only by the hood light over the stove. The rest of the apartment stayed in shadow, quiet and settled. Outside the window, the evening had already cooled. The day felt finished, even if the mind hadn't quite accepted that yet. The person wrapped a towel around the lid and twisted. Nothing. Tried again harder this time. Still nothing. The jar stayed perfectly still, as if it had decided this was where the line was drawn. A sigh came out sharper than expected. It wasn't really about the jar. Earlier in the day, there had been a decision that wouldn't land. Not a big life-changing one, just one of those medium-sized choices that somehow feel heavier than they should. Stay where you are or move on. Say yes or say no. Push through or pause. The kind of decision that seems like it should have a clear answer, but doesn't. The mind had been working on it all afternoon, tightening around it the way fingers tightened around the jar. Every angle examined, every possible outcome imagined, every risk highlighted in bright mental ink. By the time evening arrived, the body felt tired in a specific way, the way you get tired from trying to force clarity. The jar was placed on the counter and stared at like it might explain itself if given enough attention. The label was faded. The glass cool to the touch. The contents inside perfectly fine, waiting, indifferent. Another attempt. This time with both hands. The shoulders tensed. The jaw clenched. The lid didn't move. The mind chimed in immediately. See? You're not strong enough. You're doing it wrong. Try harder. So the person did. A firmer grip, more pressure. A quick twist meant to surprise the lid into cooperation. Nothing. The frustration rose fast out of proportion to the situation. It always does when effort meets resistance for too long. The body leaned closer to the counter like proximity might help. Like being nearer to the problem would somehow solve it. The thought arrived without warning. Why is this so hard? And beneath it, another quieter one. Why am I fighting this? The person stopped twisting. The hands stayed on the jar, but the effort drained out of them. The shoulders dropped a fraction. The breath, which had been shallow and tight, found a little more room. There was a memory then unrelated on the surface. A time years ago when someone had said, "Try loosening it first." Not advice for jars exactly. Advice for situations, for conversations, for moments when everything feels locked. At the time, it had sounded too simple, almost dismissive. Now standing in the dim kitchen, it landed differently. The person set the jar down and stepped back. Just one step. Enough to change the angle, enough to break the spell of force. The room felt quieter from there. Acceptance has a reputation for being passive. Like it means giving up or settling or pretending you don't care. But standing there, hands no longer straining, it felt nothing like that. It felt more like honesty, like admitting that pushing wasn't working. The decision from earlier floated back into awareness. The one that had been tightened by fear, by urgency, by the belief that there must be a right answer available immediately. The more the mind had twisted around it, the less it had moved. Maybe the problem wasn't the lock. Maybe the problem was the grip. The person picked the jar up again, this time without the towel. Just bare hands, a lighter hold. Not testing strength, just contact. The glass felt cool, solid, ordinary. Instead of twisting harder, the person did something else. They loosened the grip slightly, not letting go, just easing. Then twisted gently. The lid shifted. Just a millimeter. Almost nothing. But enough. A small laugh escaped, surprised and quiet. Not because the jar was open, it wasn't yet, but because the resistance had changed the moment the force did. The lid turned again, easier this time. And then it came off completely, without drama, without effort, as if it had never been stuck at all. The contents inside smelled fine, normal, unthreatening. The jar had not been guarding anything dangerous. It had just been closed. The person stood there for a moment longer than necessary, lid in one hand, jar in the other. The realization didn't rush in. It didn't need to. Some locks don't respond to pressure. Some doors open when you stop trying to break them down. The decision from earlier hadn't resolved itself yet. Nothing had been solved, but something had softened. The urgency had loosened its hold. The body no longer felt like it was wrestling the evening. The jar went back on the counter, open now, doing nothing special. The kitchen light hummed quietly. The night continued. And somewhere in that ordinary scene, a new understanding settled in, not as a lesson, but as a possibility. Acceptance wasn't the end of movement. It was the key that allowed movement to happen. The jar stayed open on the counter, quietly unremarkable. No glow of success, no sense of victory. Just an open jar doing what open jars do. The moment had passed, and yet it lingered in the body like a soft echo. The person rinsed the lid and set it in the drying rack. The sound of water against metal was gentle, almost meditative. The hands moved slower now, not because there was nothing to do, but because there was no rush to finish. The kitchen didn't ask for speed. The night didn't ask for answers. It was easier to breathe this way. The decision from earlier returned again, as it had all evening. But it arrived differently this time. Less demanding, less sharp around the edges. It no longer felt like a locked door that had to be forced open immediately. It felt more like a room that could be entered later. There is a strange relief in admitting you don't know yet. Not the relief of giving up, but the relief of honesty. The kind that lets your shoulders drop without explanation. The kind that allows uncertainty to exist without turning it into a problem that needs fixing. The mind, of course, tried to reassert itself. It said, "You still need to decide." It said, "You can't avoid this forever." And it was right. But it was missing something important. Avoidance and acceptance are not the same thing. Avoidance tightens. Acceptance softens. Avoidance turns away. Acceptance stays. Standing there in the quiet kitchen, it was clear which one had been happening earlier. The constant thinking, the rehearsing, the twisting that hadn't been engagement. It had been resistance disguised as effort. The person leaned back against the counter, cool tile pressing through the thin fabric of a shirt. The sensation anchored the body to the present. Not the future, not the outcome. Just here. Sometimes the mind believes that if it can just solve everything, now rest will be allowed later. But rest doesn't come as a reward. It comes as a condition. It arrives when the nervous system feels safe enough to stand down. Acceptance was doing that now. Not as a philosophy, not as a rule, just as a lived moment of not fighting what was already here. The person thought again of the jar, how the lid had shifted only after the grip loosened, how effort had been replaced with contact, how control had given way to cooperation. There was no guarantee that every problem worked that way. Life wasn't a series of jars waiting to be opened with the right trick. Some situations were genuinely hard. Some choices carried real consequences. Acceptance didn't erase that. What it did erase was the extra suffering added by force. The extra layer of tension that comes from insisting reality be different before you're willing to meet it. The person picked up the jar again more out of habit than need, and then set it back down. There was nothing left to do with it. It had already served its purpose. The kitchen light was turned off, leaving only the faint glow from the hallway. Shadows stretched and softened. The apartment felt larger now, not because it had changed, but because the mind wasn't crowding it with demands. Moving into the living room, the person sat on the couch and let the body settle into the cushions. The posture was different from earlier in the evening, less rigid, more supported, as if the furniture was allowed to help now. The decision remained undecided, and that was okay. There was a subtle trust beginning to form, not in a specific outcome, but in the process itself. Trust that clarity didn't need to be forced. Trust that understanding could emerge without being wrestled into place. Trust that waiting wasn't the same as failing. The night continued to unfold without asking permission. A car passed outside. Someone upstairs walked across their apartment. The world carried on unaffected by whether one person had figured things out or not. That too was part of the lesson, though it didn't arrive as a lesson. It arrived as perspective. The world didn't need to be controlled in order to be lived in. Peace didn't come from managing every detail. It came from managing the reaction to what couldn't be managed at all. Acceptance, it turned out, wasn't a master key because it opened every door. It was a master key because it unlocked the hand that was gripping too tightly. With that, the body sank deeper into the couch. The breath slowed. The day finally began to loosen its hold. The decision would come when it came. And until then, nothing else needed to be opened. The message had been sitting there for days. Not open, not unread. Just there marked waiting. The kind of message that doesn't go away when you swipe the screen dark. It lingers somewhere behind the eyes, reappearing at quiet moments. The phone lay face down on the kitchen table. The room was dim lit only by a small lamp near the sink. Outside, the street was quiet. A few cars passed now, and then their sound stretching briefly and then fading. The message didn't need to be read again. Its shape was already memorized. Short, careless, dismissive in a way that was hard to prove, but easy to feel. Anger had arrived immediately when it was first seen, sharp, clear, energizing. It had felt good at first, like standing up straight after being pushed. But days later, the anger was still there. No longer sharp, just heavy. It showed up in small ways, in the tightness of the chest while washing dishes, in the shortness of replies to unrelated texts, in the way the body stayed alert even when nothing was happening. The message had become a cell. Forgiveness often gets described as something generous, something moral, something you do for someone else when you're ready to be the bigger person. But right now, forgiveness felt nothing like generosity. It felt like loss, like letting something go that had been keeping the hurt organized. Anger gives shape to pain. It makes it feel purposeful. Without it, the pain feels exposed. The phone was picked up, then set down again. Fingers hovered, unsure where to go. The urge wasn't to reply, it was to reread, to remind, to justify. The mind replayed the exchange again, this time with added commentary. They always do this. They never take responsibility. If I let this go, I'm saying it's fine. The sink filled with water. A plate was lowered into it. Soap bubbled. The routine was familiar enough that the body could do it without instruction. The water ran over the hands, warm and steady. A thought surfaced quietly, almost reluctantly. What if forgiveness isn't about them at all? It didn't feel comforting. It felt destabilizing. Because if forgiveness wasn't about them, then it didn't depend on apology or acknowledgement. It didn't wait for fairness. It depended on something else. On a decision made internally without witness. The plate was rinsed and set on the rack. Another followed. The sound of water against ceramic filled the space. Simple, repetitive. The anger tightened again, as if resisting. If you forgive, you're weak. If you forgive, you forget. If you forgive, they walk free. That last one stuck. Walk free. The image shifted then. Not dramatically. Just enough. The idea of a prison not built of walls or bars, but of repetition. The same message replayed. The same argument rehearsed. The same tension carried from room to room. Someone was locked in that prison, but it wasn't the person who sent the message. The realization didn't soften anything right away. It irritated. Because it meant the anger wasn't punishing the right person. It meant the sentence was being served internally. Forgiveness in that light didn't look like mercy. It looked like release, not approval. not reconciliation, just unlocking the door. The water was turned off. Hands were dried on a towel that had been washed too many times to feel new. The fabric was thin, still functional. The phone was picked up again. The message was open this time. Read once, then again. The words hadn't changed, but the body's reaction had. The familiar spike didn't come, just a dull pressure. Manageable, temporary. It became clear that holding on to the anger hadn't been protecting dignity. It had been keeping the wound active. Forgiveness didn't mean sending a kind reply. It didn't even mean replying at all. It meant deciding that the message wouldn't get unlimited access to the nervous system anymore. The phone was locked, set back down. Nothing had been resolved. The relationship hadn't been repaired. No apology had arrived. But something subtle had shifted. The anger no longer felt like a weapon. It felt like a weight that could be set down, if not permanently, then at least for now. The kitchen light hummed softly. Outside, a car passed. Somewhere else, someone was laughing, unaware of this quiet standoff. Forgiveness hadn't happened yet. Not fully. But the door had been noticed. And sometimes that's the first thing that changes. The night moved on without asking for a decision. The kitchen was cleaned. The light above the sink was turned off. Only the small lamp in the corner remained, casting a soft circle on the wall. The phone stayed where it was silent, face down, no longer glowing with urgency. Not replying didn't feel powerful. It felt unfinished. That was the uncomfortable part. Forgiveness is often imagined as a clear ending, but most of the time it's just the absence of escalation. Nothing dramatic. Just a quiet refusal to keep feeding the same fire. The body noticed the difference first. The shoulders weren't pulled up anymore. The breath came and went without catching. The tight band around the chest loosened enough to be noticeable. Anger had been doing something specific all along. It had been keeping the hurt alive sharp enough to justify itself. Without it, the hurt felt softer, but also more exposed. That vulnerability was unsettling. There was a moment of doubt. Maybe I should say something, not to fix it, just to make sure the silence wasn't mistaken for acceptance. The mind tried to frame the response again. Short, polite, firm. A message that would protect dignity without opening the door too wide. But each version carried the same tension. The same heat in the fingers, the same tightening in the jaw. It became clear that replying right now wasn't about communication. It was about discharge, about giving the anger somewhere to go. Forgiveness in this moment looked less like kindness and more like containment. The phone was moved to another room, not hidden, just out of reach. The body didn't need the constant reminder. Sitting down, the quiet felt different than before. Not empty, not peaceful exactly, just open. The image of the prison returned, this time more clearly. A small room built from repetition, from replayed sentences and imagined confrontations. From waiting for an apology that might never come. The door wasn't locked from the outside. That realization didn't erase the past. It didn't make the message harmless, but it shifted responsibility. Staying inside was no longer automatic. Forgiveness wasn't about letting someone else off the hook. It was about deciding how much of the present would be given to something that already happened. The body leaned back. The chair creaked slightly. The sound grounded the moment. There was a memory of a time long ago when anger had been released quickly. Words spoken, voices raised. It had felt satisfying for a few minutes. Then the familiar crash, the exhaustion, the sense that nothing had actually improved. This was different. This was quieter, less certain, and strangely lighter. The message still existed. The relationship was still complicated. None of that had changed. But the anger was no longer pacing the inside of the mind, looking for a way out. Forgiveness didn't arrive as warmth. It arrived as space. Enough space to sleep without replaying the same scene. Enough space to eat without the taste of resentment lingering. Enough space to let tomorrow be tomorrow. The lamp was turned off. The room went dark. The house settled again, making the small sounds it makes when no one is asking anything from it. Lying down, the thought came one last time. What if they never understand? The answer didn't feel dramatic. It felt honest. Then they won't. Understanding wasn't required for release. Forgiveness didn't promise reconciliation. It didn't guarantee change. It didn't erase boundaries. It simply returned ownership of the nervous system to the person living in it. The prisoner was set free, not with ceremony, not with forgiveness spoken out loud, just by opening the door and choosing not to step back inside. The night continued, and for the first time in days, the anger wasn't keeping watch. They got home later than they meant to, not because the work was impossible, but because leaving felt like letting something go. The last email, the last check, the last glance at the calendar, the small invisible rituals that made them feel like they were still in control. When they finally stepped inside, the house was quiet. No music, no TV, just the soft sound of the HVAC running a low, steady breath in the walls. A porch light spilled in through the front window, thin and pale. They stood in the entryway for a moment without moving, still wearing their outside self. The jacket, the shoes, the posture. That posture had become automatic over the years, shoulders back, face neutral, eyes alert. The kind of body language that says, "I've got this." Even if underneath the body felt tired in places no one could see. They reached up and loosened the knot of their tie, then paused. Something about the motion made their chest tighten slightly, like removing it would mean admitting how much the day had taken out of them, so they left it on a little longer than necessary. In the hallway mirror, they caught their own reflection. The outfit still looked sharp. The hair was still in place. The expression was controlled, practiced, familiar. They had worked hard to build this version of themselves, not in a vain way, in a survival way. A A long time ago, they learned that being respected felt safer than being misunderstood. That looking capable often meant being left alone. That in certain rooms you had to arrive already armored. And over time, the armor got heavier. They stepped into the bedroom and opened the closet. The hangers were arranged neatly. Shirts grouped by color. Shoes lined up like a quiet parade. Everything in its place. Everything ready. They slipped the jacket off first. The fabric lifted away from their shoulders like a weight, leaving almost before they noticed it was there. They hung it carefully, smoothing the sleeve, adjusting the collar. It looked like nothing special on a hanger. Just cloth. They unbuttoned the shirt, folded it once, then twice the way they always did. The motions were efficient, practiced. In the background, a ceiling fan turned slowly, its soft whir filling the room, like a gentle metronome. They sat on the edge of the bed and stared at their hands. Even without the jacket, they still felt the day on their skin. A meeting that didn't go well. A moment where someone challenged them. The way their voice had stayed steady while their stomach tightened. The way they'd smiled at the right times. It was strange how quickly a person could become a role. At work, they were the one who knows, the one who can handle it, the one who keeps it together. Those titles weren't official, but they lived in people's expectations. And those expectations had their own gravity. They reached for the tie again and finally pulled it loose. The fabric slid through their fingers, smooth and cool, then fell into their lap. For a second, they just held it there. It hit them then how much they depended on the costume. Not for others, for themselves. The clothes were proof. Proof that they mattered. Proof that they belonged. Proof that they weren't the younger version of themselves anymore. The one who had been overlooked, underestimated, talked over. They stood and walked back to the closet, tie still in hand, and hung it beside the jacket. Seeing it there, still quiet, made something inside them shift. If the jacket is just cloth, then what was the power they'd been carrying all day? Where did it actually live? They turned away from the closet and looked around the room. A lamp on the dresser, a water glass, a small stack of books they kept meaning to read. Ordinary objects, indifferent to job titles, indifferent to performance. The room didn't care who they were outside. The ceiling fan kept turning. The air moved gently across their skin, and for a moment they felt the simplest thing. They were still here, not as a role, not as a reputation, not as an image, just as a person in a quiet room with a tired body. They sat down again this time, letting their shoulders drop fully. The release felt almost unfamiliar, like taking off shoes you didn't realize were too tight until they're gone. A thought rose up, soft but clear. What if I'm allowed to be myself after the cloak comes off? It wasn't a question about quitting or escaping. They weren't imagining throwing everything away. They had built a life. They had responsibilities. They cared about doing well. But somewhere along the way, the doing had started to replace the being. And if they were honest, the being had been waiting patiently underneath all of it, like skin under a uniform. They stood and walked to the bathroom, turning on the faucet. Water ran cold for a second, then warmed. They washed their hands slowly, watching the way the water moved over their fingers, clear and simple. No performance, no outcome, just water doing what water does. They dried their hands and returned to the bedroom. On the hanger, the jacket stayed perfectly still. It didn't look impressive anymore. It just looked like something that could be taken off. And that felt like a kind of freedom. Later that night, the house grew even quieter. The sounds of the day had faded. No notifications, no conversations replaying themselves quite as loudly. Just the low hum of the ceiling fan and the occasional creak as the house settled into itself. They lay back on the bed without turning off the light right away. One arm rested across their stomach, the other along the mattress. Their breathing slowed naturally, without effort, without instruction. Their eyes drifted to the closet again. The jacket hung there exactly as they had left it. Neat, proper, still holding the shape it had worn all day, as if waiting to be called back into service. The tie beside it caught the light, slightly smooth and polished. It struck them how small it all looked from here. Earlier, those things had carried weight, authority, expectation. Now, in the quiet, they looked almost fragile. Temporary. They thought about how easily the world confuses the symbols for the substance. Titles, clothing, access, attention. Those things can open doors. They can make life easier in certain ways. They can protect you in rooms where being seen as powerful matters. But they are not the power. They are the cloak. And cloaks by nature are meant to be worn and removed. The person lying there had worn many cloaks in their life. Student, new hire, expert, leader. Each one had taught them something. Each one had required a posture, a tone, a way of holding themselves. None of them had been false, but none of them had been the whole truth either. They shifted slightly on the bed, feeling the mattress give under their weight. The body underneath the rolls felt steady, solid, real in a way that didn't depend on being recognized. There was a quiet relief in that. They remembered moments when they had been afraid to take the cloak off, afraid that without it they would disappear, that people would stop listening, that they would lose whatever respect they had earned. But here alone in the room, nothing vanished. They were still breathing, still thinking, still present. The respect they needed most tonight wasn't coming from outside anyway. It was coming from the simple act of letting themselves rest. They reached over and turned off the lamp. The room softened instantly, edges fading into shadow. The fan continued its slow rotation, steady and indifferent. In the dark, it was easier to tell the difference between what was carried and who was carrying it. The cloak hadn't given them their voice. It hadn't given them their judgment. It hadn't given them their capacity to care, to decide, to endure. Those things had been there before the jacket ever was. They would be there tomorrow too. Tomorrow they would put the cloak on again. Step back into the world. Play the roles that help things function. There is nothing wrong with that. The cloak had its place. But it wasn't fused to them, and tonight at least they were allowed to set it down. That knowledge settled in gently, like a hand placed on the chest. They didn't need to strip their life down to nothing to be real. They didn't need to reject success to keep their soul. They didn't need to choose between being capable and being human. They could wear the cloak without mistaking it for their skin. As sleep crept closer, one last thought passed through, simple and unforced. Even without the crown, even without the room, even without the name on the door, they were still the one living this life, and that was enough. It didn't feel like loss at first. It felt like thinning. Like something that used to move easily was now spreading itself too wide, too far, and becoming quiet in the process. The kind of change that doesn't announce an ending, but leaves you wondering where the movement went. The hotel room was cool, almost too cool, the air conditioner working steadily in the background. A single lamp cast a soft circle of light across the small table. On it sat a glass of water, untouched for a while now. The day had been long in a quiet way. Meetings, airports, hallways that all looked the same. By evening, the body felt dry, not thirsty exactly, but drained. As if something essential had been given away in small amounts all day long. The glass was picked up, turned slowly in the hand. The water inside barely moved, just a faint ripple along the edge. For a moment, there was an urge to drink it quickly, to take it all in, as if that could fix the feeling. But the body hesitated. Outside the window, the city lights stretched into the distance, pale and scattered like stars that had fallen and decided to stay. Somewhere beyond them, land that never saw this much light waited quietly. The thought arrived without effort. This is what a desert feels like. Not the dramatic kind, not endless sand and blazing sun, but the internal kind. The feeling of having nothing left to give and no clear idea of how to refill. The water was sipped slowly instead, one mouthful, then another. Enough to feel it move through the body, not enough to erase the dryness entirely. Fear showed up gently here, not as panic, but as concern. What if this is permanent? What if things don't flow the way they used to? The idea of drying up felt personal, as if momentum itself were something fragile that could be lost forever. As if energy once gone didn't know how to return. The glass was set back down. Condensation gathered along the sides, forming small droplets that slid downward and disappeared into the coaster. Watching that, something shifted. The water wasn't gone. It was changing. The stream that had moved so easily earlier in the day, the conversations, the decisions, the constant motion had reached a different terrain now. It wasn't being blocked. It was spreading out, thinning, becoming less visible, like water entering sand. At first it looks like disappearance, but nothing is actually lost. The body leaned back in the chair. The hum of the air conditioner grew more noticeable. The steady rhythm of it created a strange sense of companionship, like something else was carrying part of the load. Fear prefers clear edges. It likes to know where things begin and end. A stream is comforting because it's obvious. You can see where it goes. A desert is unsettling because everything happens underground. Sitting there, it became clear how often fear mistakes invisibility for failure. Just because movement can't be seen doesn't mean it's stopped. Water that enters dry land doesn't vanish. It travels differently. The thought didn't try to convince. It didn't need to. The body already knew this from experience. From times when rest looked like stagnation, from moments when stepping back felt like falling behind. But something had always been happening beneath the surface. The glass was picked up again. Another small sip. The body accepted it without urgency. Outside, the city continued its quiet pulse. Cars moved, lights shifted. Somewhere far away, rain might be falling, feeding ground that wouldn't show it for a long time. The desert doesn't reject water. It receives it slowly. That idea softened something. The pressure to perform, the fear of running out, the belief that usefulness required constant visible flow. Maybe this phase wasn't about pushing forward. Maybe it was about soaking in. The body stretched, slightly, shoulders rolling back. A deeper breath arrived on its own. The dryness in the chest eased just a little. Nothing dramatic had changed. The schedule for tomorrow still existed. The work still waited. The uncertainty about what came next hadn't been resolved. But the feeling of depletion no longer felt like a warning sign. It felt like a transition. The stream hadn't failed. It had reached new ground. And new ground always looks quiet before it becomes fertile. The glass sat half full on the table. Enough for later, enough for now. The body rested back into the chair, letting the hum of the room hold the space, trusting that what couldn't be seen was still very much alive. Later that night, the desert feeling returned, but it didn't feel as sharp. It showed up in quieter ways. In the pause after turning off the lamp, in the space between one breath and the next. The room felt still, almost suspended, as if waiting for permission to move again. The body lay on the bed without immediately reaching for sleep. The air conditioner continued its steady work, pushing cool air across the room. The sound was constant, unbothered, doing what it was designed to do, without needing recognition. The mind tried to label the stillness as lack, as emptiness, as a sign that something had gone missing. But the body didn't agree. There was a subtle sense of activity happening beneath the surface. Muscles releasing tension they had been holding all day. The nervous system settling after hours of staying alert. The breath finding a slower rhythm without being told. The stream hadn't stopped. It had changed state. Earlier movement had been visible. Emails sent, words spoken, tasks completed. Now movement was happening in a different direction. Inward, downward, into places that didn't produce immediate results. Fear tends to distrust this kind of movement. It can't measure it. It can't track progress. It doesn't know when to expect a payoff. But water doesn't ask the desert for feedback. It sinks in, it spreads out, it waits. Lying there, it became easier to sense how much effort had gone into trying to stay liquid all the time. To keep flowing, responding, producing. As if drying up meant becoming irrelevant. But relevance isn't lost in stillness. It's reorganized. The body shifted onto its side. The sheets adjusted. The mattress supported weight without resistance. Support appeared again quietly without needing to be earned. Fear had insisted that slowing down meant falling behind. That rest was a detour. But the desert doesn't argue with water. It transforms it. What enters the sand doesn't disappear. It cools. It collects. It waits for conditions to change. And sometimes it rises. The image came softly. Water warming under the surface, lifting invisible, turning into vapor. Not rushing, not forcing itself upward, just responding to heat, to time, to nature. Becoming something else without losing itself. That felt important. The body had been trying to stay a stream in a place that no longer supported streams. No wonder it felt exhausting. No wonder the flow felt strained. Accepting evaporation wasn't failure. It was adaptation. Clouds don't look like water, but they carry it all the same. The next phase didn't require effort. It required patience. Trust that movement was still happening, even if it couldn't be seen. Trust that the cycle hadn't broken, only shifted. The mind relaxed around that idea, not because it fully understood it, but because it didn't need to control it. Outside, the city lights stayed steady. Somewhere beyond them, land cooled under the night sky. The air moved. Moisture gathered invisibly. The body followed the same pattern, letting go of the need to push, allowing itself to be held in a phase that didn't demand action. Sleep arrived without being chased. The desert remained, but it no longer felt hostile. It felt like a passage, a place water doesn't fight but learns from. And somewhere ahead, unseen, the cycle would complete itself. The vapor would gather. The clouds would move. Rain would fall where it was needed. For now, it was enough to rest in this form. Enough to trust that nothing essential had been lost, only transformed. The train was already moving when the person realized how tired they were. Not the kind of tired that shows up all at once, dramatic and obvious. This was quieter. A slow heaviness behind the eyes. A weight in the shoulders that didn't belong to the bag they were carrying. The kind of tired that comes from staying alert for too long, from watching the road, even when you're not the one driving. The seat was warm from the day. The window beside it showed reflections more than scenery, flickers of light. The ghost of a face layered over the darkening evening. The hum of the train settled into a steady rhythm, neither fast nor slow. Just consistent, predictable. That predictability should have been comforting. Instead, the mind stayed awake. It ran through lists. Things that hadn't been finished. Things that might be missed. Things that could still go wrong. Tomorrow's responsibilities lined up neatly, each one tapping on the inside of the skull like it was important to be seen first. The body leaned back anyway. Muscles gave up their tension in small stages like they were negotiating a ceasefire. The head rested against the window. Cool glass met warm skin. The contrast felt grounding, even pleasant. The thought came uninvited but familiar. You shouldn't fall asleep. Not because there was danger. Not because anything bad was about to happen. just the old belief that staying awake was somehow useful. That vigilance equaled responsibility, that if you stopped paying attention, you might miss the moment you needed to act. The train rocked gently as it picked up speed. The sound of the rails was even almost lulling. Around the car, other passengers were doing ordinary things. One person scrolled on a phone. Another stared forward, eyes unfocused. Someone else had already let their head fall to the side, mouth slightly open, fully surrendered to sleep. The sight stirred something complicated. A mix of envy and concern. How can they sleep? Don't they know anything could happen? The mind offered these questions as if they were practical, as if worry were a form of care. The body, however, had different priorities. The eyelids felt heavier now. Blinking took effort. The breath slowed without instruction. A yawn stretched the jaw wide, pulling tension loose from places that hadn't realized they were tight. The train kept going. That was the strange part. Nothing changed when the person yawned. The lights didn't flicker. The tracks didn't bend. The train didn't ask for permission or approval. It moved forward with or without anyone's attention. There was a memory then from years ago of being a child on a long car ride, sitting in the back seat, watching streetlights pass like quiet stars, fighting sleep because it felt important to stay awake to witness the whole journey. And then waking up later, surprised to find the car still moving closer to the destination than expected. Nothing bad had happened in that gap. Life had carried on. The present moment felt like that memory layered over itself. The adult version of the same pattern. The same belief that being awake equaled being in control. That consciousness itself was the thing keeping everything on track. The train slowed slightly as it passed through a darker stretch. The hum dropped an octave. The rhythm stayed steady. The body responded immediately, shoulders sinking further into the seat. Another thought surfaced softer than the others. What if it's okay to rest? The mind resisted. It listed reasons. What if you miss your stop? What if something goes wrong? What if you regret letting go? All reasonable questions, all unanswered. But underneath them was a simpler truth. The train didn't rely on the passenger's worry to reach its destination. The tracks were laid. The direction was set. The system was already in motion. The person noticed their hands resting in their lap, fingers unclenched, palms open. The body had chosen its position without asking for permission. It had made a quiet decision on its own. The head tipped slightly to one side. The window hummed faintly with motion. The eyes closed for a second, then opened again, startled by the unfamiliar softness of that brief darkness. Don't fall asleep yet, the mind urged. Stay alert. But alert for what? The answer didn't come. The question hung there unresolved. The person let the eyes close again, this time for a fraction longer. The train rocked. The rails sang their steady song. The world continued its forward movement, unconcerned with whether one passenger was awake to witness it. There was no dramatic release, no deep surrender, just a gradual easing, like loosening a grip that had been held too long without realizing it. If sleep came, it would come. If it didn't, that would be fine too. Either way, the train would keep moving, and for the first time in a while, the person felt the possibility that maybe they didn't have to carry the journey on their shoulders. The eyes opened again slowly, as if surfacing from shallow water. It was hard to tell how much time had passed. Maybe a few minutes, maybe less. The train was still moving the same gentle rhythm underneath everything steady and unbothered. Nothing had changed. That realization landed softly, not with surprise, but with relief. The lights inside the car glowed the same pale yellow. The reflections in the window still layered the dark outside with the faint outline of faces and seats. The person across the aisle was still asleep, head tipped back, breathing slow and even. Another passenger shifted in their seat and then settled again. Life had not paused. Life had not needed supervision. The mind tried one more time to reclaim control. It offered a final checklist. Stay aware, count the stops, don't lose track. These thoughts had the tone of responsibility, but they carried the weight of habit more than necessity. Underneath them, something else stirred. A quiet trust. Not the dramatic kind that comes with certainty or optimism. This was smaller, quieter. The trust that systems can function without constant monitoring. That momentum doesn't require tension. That rest doesn't equal failure. The body leaned more fully into the seat now. The spine curved naturally. The shoulders no longer hovered waiting. The breath settled into a slow, even pattern, rising and falling without effort. It was easier to notice the sound of the train this way. Not just noise, but texture. The soft clack of rails, the low hum of the engine, the subtle sway that rocked the car side to side. It felt almost like being carried. There was a strange tenderness in that realization. So much of life had been spent trying to drive, trying to steer, trying to stay awake at the wheel, even when it wasn't necessary, as if vigilance were the price of safety. But here on this train, that belief didn't hold up. The person thought of all the times they'd lain awake at night rehearsing futures that never arrived, worrying through conversations that never happened, staying mentally alert long past the point where it made any difference. None of that had changed the tracks. The train slowed as it approached a station. The sound shifted. Brakes hissed softly. A few people stood up, gathering their things. The doors opened with a familiar chime, letting in a rush of cooler air and distant city noise. The person opened their eyes fully now, more awake than before, but not tense. Watching without gripping, observing without managing. Some passengers stepped off, others stepped on. The doors closed again. The train resumed its movement. Still no catastrophe. Still no missed signal that mattered. The person realized something then, not as a thought, but as a felt sense. Waking and sleeping weren't opposites in the way they'd been treated. One wasn't responsible and the other careless. They were just different states of being carried. Even if sleep had come fully, the train would have kept going. Even if the mind had let go completely, the destination would still exist. This didn't mean attention was useless. It didn't mean responsibility disappeared. It meant that attention didn't need to be strained to be effective. That awareness could be soft and still work. The head leaned back again. The window vibrated gently against the skull. The sensation was oddly comforting, like white noise made physical. The eyelids lowered this time without resistance. There was no dramatic decision, no internal speech about allowing or choosing. The body simply followed the rhythm it had been hearing all along. The train continued through the night lights, passing stations appearing and fading. The world moved at its own pace, reliable in ways that didn't require constant thought. And somewhere between one stop and the next, the person understood something simple and freeing. Worry wasn't keeping the train on the tracks. Being awake wasn't what made the journey safe. The journey was already happening, with or without vigilance, with or without effort. The body rested into that truth, however briefly. And in that resting, something else became possible, a kind of peace that didn't need to be held together because it wasn't fragile in the first place. The train rolled on, and the passenger finally didn't feel the need to stay awake just to make sure it did. Wherever you are tonight, I'm grateful you chose to spend this quiet time here. If these stories help you rest, you're welcome to subscribe and return whenever you need a gentle place to land. And now, you don't need to do anything more. Let the night hold what you can't carry. And if sleep comes, let it come.